A Plague Tale: Innocence offers a distinctly contrasting world. On one side, we're given a lush and varied linear world with an incredible amount of detail and fidelity. Forest floors will be covered in leaves and twigs, with more leaves actively falling from the branches above. And building walls are likewise detailed with numerous colorful additions in the form of leaves and dirt and grime. Rarely, if ever, does the world feel empty like so many video game worlds do. There's a believability to it all, and it makes you connect to it at a higher degree. This connection to the world is strengthened by character interactions with the environment. Interiors are realistically lit and are realistically messy. Character interactions encompass sailing a boat through a moody cave or catching butterflies in a castle ruin. The emotional state of the characters is often expressed through these interactions, making the world a key player in the storytelling. Oftentimes, the game presents a distinct vista with many horizontal layers like paths, buildings, and castle walls. Individual assets are often framed well in the player path, leveraging the strength of single-player linear games. It's simply much more feasible to build a believable and detailed world when working with linear games. The player follows a path, allowing for dramatic framing and intentional impact. Innocence's color palette mostly uses dark blues and cool oranges, a pair that's often seen in gaming and visual media, and it sometimes mixes the two, especially around sundown for that characteristic look. Now, I did say that the world of Innocence offers a distinctly contrasting world, and I haven't talked about the other part yet. Not everything in A Plague Tale land is beauty and cozy fall forests. The other side is abject horror. There is a sense of inevitability to A Plague Tale: Innocence. It's a world that's rapidly devolving owing to both actions on the part of humans and the rat swarms. Add an undertone of ancient prophecies and the sense of inevitability is complete. It's a world that's going dark, where only small individual lights are keeping the horrors away. But separate horrors in the form of human enemies can also be the wielders of these supposed safe beacons, and they're not hesitant to act in rash ways to protect themselves. The dichotomy of nature versus man has broken down where neither side can be trusted any longer. Cities have become dark open gravesites where guards are struggling to manage the rat swarms and mountains of bodies. Areas outside the city fare no better, with the ravages of war being all too prevalent, and military camps readying for new offensive are all too abundant. Every place is ominous in its own way, and you as a player get to see the rat nest infestation make its way into the holiest halls of power. There's also a dash of gothic elements. Hanging lanterns from chains, armored horses, and spiked carts are no rare sight and are excellently complemented by the often dark lighting. The attention to detail is still very much apparent in the more horror-focused scenes. Rooftops glisten in the strong moonlight, while the gruesome consequences of human infighting are spilling out onto the streets of the collapsing vestiges of civilization. There are also beautiful areas offering their own take on horror, where the sheer power and indifference on display create psychological turmoil in the player. The indifference is no accident, as evidenced by affairs in certain rooms and corridors attached to these beautiful spaces. Yes, the rat swarms are horrifying, but there's a surprising variety to the horror. A silent city at night, a mountain of dead farm animals, and the issues the main character is psychologically grappling with. The world constantly switches between these horrors in a believable manner and layers them in between each other. The rat nest infestation doesn't as much break down man-made structures as it more envelops them, integrates them. That can be evidenced by the cathedral, for example. It's not the first piece of media to ask who the real monsters are, but it is still very effective in doing so. How do you make a sequel to this? How do you top this? How do you do more? Is it even possible to do more, to get more beauty and more horror? Fast forward to October 2022 and we see the release of A Plague Tale Requiem, a game that vastly expands on the visuals of the first game and the in-world storytelling. As is true for so many sequels, it is a game that dials up everything seen in the first game. The detail levels seen in-game are approaching the absurd. Beaches look near realistic with a huge amount of ground detail, including unique small rocks, grains of sand, and natural-looking erosion. Garden floors have individual small plants swaying in the breeze and real 3D geometry to sell the idea of a natural environment that can only be managed to a certain point. There's little to no sense of unnatural conformity. Rocks are lodged between the plants and small puddles are formed where the surrounding area is believingly wet. The game continues the use of dramatic and beautiful vistas, but similar dramatic effects can be seen in the micro details. Look at this wall, for example. The lighting has a realistic harshness to it, and the bricks themselves are seemingly all unique. I'm unable to spot a single brick that has been reused, and the details near it with the plants at the bottom complete the comprehensiveness of this singular in-world wall. Spaces simply feel right. They are dusty, messy, and irregular. The same can be said for the natural environments, and care has been taken to ensure that they are also beautiful. Furthermore, you spend longer time in each area, meaning you get to see how they evolve over time. A sunny summer will evolve into drizzling rain, for example. The world has more scale and it keeps up the detail levels far out from the player. Clouds move through it and dynamically cover the ground in their shadows, which works to make the world increasingly believable. Culture is showcased in cities with beautiful food exhibited and in-world celebrations. And sections that could previously be characterized as creepy in Innocence are now oddly beautiful. A dark city lit by moonlight. A small ravaged garden in the poor quarter. And an elaborate book open on a reading table in a dimly lit hall. Requiem introduces a sense of adventure. Ships are heavily featured and a wide variety of creatures inhabit the world. It feels as if the developers have breathed in a massive amount of life into the game. Life that, like the horrors of Innocence, are layered and work together in lifelike scenes. Foliage sways in the wind, children run around and play while chickens roam freely. A few wooden boards have been placed on the ground to make navigation easier. Variety goes up a notch with mountainous areas, markets, dilapidated cities sprawl, and multiple in-world events. And the graphical characteristics, including acid detail and lighting, cannot be overstated. It's impressively simple to get lost in this linear single-player adventure where every single detail has been placed and created with care. Often, games excel at either making small, intimate spaces or wide, open spaces. Requiem manages to do both. You know what this section will be about. This section will be about the horror of A Plague Tale Requiem, and while Requiem does have the same kind of horror as Innocence and dials it up to previously unimagined levels, it also introduces a very different kind of horror. One of the central themes of Requiem is cyclicity, and it concentrates a lot on how the characters within the game grapple with the cyclical nature of the rat plague. Its physical horror is dialed up, but it places a greater emphasis on psychological turmoil and consequences of character actions compared to Innocence. Death is a more naturally occurring part of the world, interspersed in the beautiful environments as well as the more horror-focused environments. A nice sunset illuminates a pile of bodies with pigs feeding on the leftovers, while the gentle moonlight illuminates the muddy tracks of a plague cart. The tone this time around is more somber, as the central theming is inescapability, not owing to inevitability, but the universal presence of death and decay. Every good is balanced by a bad. It feels less as if the horror is imposed upon the world and more as if it is a natural part of it. This sense is strengthened with the game's heightened focus on prophecy. Rituals, murals, and beliefs are built upon in-world history and heavily featured in-game. Character motivations are in large part driven by these beliefs, leading them to do both gruesome and beautiful things. On the technical side, the increased fidelity allows the game to represent more detailed destruction, bodies, and guts, and the sense of liveliness to the world is strengthened with environmental effects such as flies buzzing about the dead and musty fog clouding the immediate area, signifying the decay. Just as the brick wall with its immense detail, the collection of guts have an unprecedented level of fidelity. Bubbles in a vomit-inducing mystery liquid, bones of dead animals, and all the entrails of unknown origin. It's not just the micro-details that have been dialed up, though. Enormous and seemingly never-ending nests are featured with their characteristic patterned walls, a black mass clinging to the world and making it its own. Huge storms impose on other environments and lends a sense of force of nature that would be foolish to attempt to fight. And the consequences: bodies flowing downriver after a mass casualty event upstream. The rat swarms are larger and fire effects are more detailed. Tunnels are more atmospheric, with a focus on particles and fog, and the actual movement of the rats feels more natural and therefore all the more threatening. In Requiem, the horror environments have graduated into something that feels more natural and more inescapable. The increased fidelity is heavily utilized to create not just impressive vistas but also more dynamic enemies and environments. Rat waves in particular feel more liquid, and the destruction they bring about is a sight to behold. Massive walls crumble under their force, with wood and stone being thrown about while still feeling heavy and threatening. This creates a mental link with environmental dangers shown throughout the game, such as storms and waves. The rat swarm is not an enemy you can fight. Doing so would be just as stupid as initiating a fistfight with the wind. I also believe this is why the massive spaces in-game are so effective. You are not in an environment where you can affect much as a player. It is simply a world in which the characters exist, not one they have much power over. Hello! I just wanted to say thank you so much for 500 subscribers. That really does mean a lot to me. I did not think that anyone would want to watch the sort of stuff that I do, but it seems like some people do, so thank you so much for that. This thank you is way too late. It's been way too long since I last made a video, but hey, better late than never. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.